welcome to your Daily Detroit for Wednesday, August 6th, 2019. Happy birthday, Jer!
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so if I know you, you're going to go to a bar and order up some Sex on the Beaches or maybe some Alabama Slammers because, man, it's not every day you turn 21.
On today's show, R.J. King from dBusiness stopped by the Podcast Detroit studio to talk about his cover story on Hantz Woodlands. It's located on a square mile in Detroit between Indian Village and the Chrysler plant that has been transformed into an urban tree farm.
Also, StockX had a major hack. The pizza glass is finally going into the new headquarters for Little Caesars, a year behind schedule, and Dan Gilbert's on the road to recovery. All that right after this word from today's show sponsor.
Traditional four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life, but LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track, and most classes are conveniently offered evenings at LTU's beautiful Southfield campus or online. So you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Find out more at ltu.edu. That's ltu.edu. Joining me in the studio is dBusiness's R.J. King. Welcome to Daily Detroit.
Thank you very much.
So we're here to talk about a story that is on the cover of dBusiness for the July-August issue, and I'm glad you circled back to it. And it's about Hantz Farms, and that was something that captured a lot of headlines a few years ago and then kind of faded into the background. Why did you decide to circle back to this now?
A lot of projects that people do, sometimes there's that proverbial pivot point, and this was one of them. Initially, Hantz Farms, which is now known as Hantz Woodlands, they initially envisioned urban farming. So think of fruits, vegetables, all those different things, and then also doing it inside abandoned buildings. Think of, plants growing from different floors, sun coming in through the empty windows and those types of things. But it became incredibly complicated. There was a lot of pushback from the city. The mayor's office, Mayor Bing at the time, was kind of on the fence. And then the community groups and nonprofit organizations were pushing back. And I think they felt threatened, and there was competition coming for planting trees and vegetables and those types of things. And so as you read the story, you learn that Hantz and his team totally pivoted and looked at a different model, which they came up with hardwood trees to grow on the empty lots that they had acquired from the city. And the city council eventually did approve the project, but only because the city went into bankruptcy and they had no choice. Kevin Orr had no affiliation or love for the land. He just wanted to get a deal done.
Well, I remember going to a city council meeting in a church nearby there on the east side, covering, this story for another publication that I was working for. And it was really interesting to hear the opposition to this initially, which was one, exactly what you're talking about. And then the second thing, and I think you touch on this in the piece, there were folks that concerned about the idea of livestock in the city. And covering the city, I've noticed that there are kind of two camps with that. There are folks who really want livestock, chickens, all that kind of stuff in the city. And then there's another group that thinks it's extremely bad for property values and all of that stuff. And I think it was really smart of John Hantz to kind of make that pivot into Woodlands because it's trees. And for a long time, Detroit was kind of known as the Paris of the Midwest and was known for its trees. So it seems like that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the reason for the long time, we had originally done a cover story on John when he was working on all this back in 2012. It just takes a while for the saplings that they planted, which are now more than 27,000. It takes 4 or 5 years for those to mature into trees that they can turn around and sell for $200 or $300 to a nursery. Comes along with a nice story about, hey, this was grown in Detroit, and by purchasing this tree, you're helping revive a neighborhood. So all the proceeds from the sale of those trees are plowed back into the community. And this is a model that can be used anywhere across the country. If a community group can find a cash crop or find some way to bring money in the door, the proceeds from that effort can be used to plant flowers, entry markers to the neighborhood, just the upkeep and everything that their respective cities might not be able to do anymore because of constraints on their budgets.
That Far East Side has seen a lot of abandonment over the last, decades, frankly. If you go down some of those streets, especially before what Hantz was doing, you'd see, just empty lots and a few houses. You have some amazing people who are sticking out. And some of them actually in your piece decided to stay because of the Woodlands.
Yeah, I spoke with two homeowners that had been there since the late 60s. Their initial concern, which a lot of residents shared, was that urban farming would bring in pesticides and rodents and other animals because if the fruit falls on the ground, it's eaten. The trees, they actually had thought of fruit trees, but even backed away from that and went to hardwood trees simply because, one, they don't require fertilizer. Two, there's no fruit to drop on the ground. And when they plant them, all of a sudden, an area that just looks fallow and nothing going on, all of a sudden looks very organized. And so the residents got on board. I mean, it was kind of a whole 100% turnover in terms of the feeling for the project. And, the residents, everybody I've talked to seems very happy with what's going on. The neighborhood's getting better. The area we're talking about, sort of loosely called the Hantz Woodlands area, but it's a square mile bounded by Jefferson, St. Jean, Mack, and Van Dyke. On the west side of that area includes Indian Village, but we're talking really the area between Indian Village east to St. Jean. Just east of St. Jean's is the Chrysler sheep plant. And as you know, they've announced, a several billion-dollar project to expand that plant, add a new Mack Avenue engine plant. And then now suppliers like Takata are coming in. So there's a lot of spin-off development that's going to occur. Hantz's project includes the renovation of 80 homes in the area and the building of 300 to 400 million more in sort of an urban housing district that'll include stores and restaurants. It's really got a lot of legs under it.
One of the things I thought was interesting too is that he actually hired somebody, Mike Score, who's been with this project the entire time. And he was somebody who has helped kind of shepherd this project. You talked to him at all?
Yes, Mike is formerly with Michigan State University Agricultural Research School and brought a lot of knowledge to the project. He's pretty much been there from the beginning, and he's overseeing or orchestrating not only the planting of these trees, but with the help of the Hantz Foundation, which is run by John's daughter, Lauren. They've been contributing money in resources to the 5 schools in the area, 3 of which are Detroit public schools, and then also encouraging classwork to go in there, say nursing programs. So now adults are using those schools at the same time. So encouraging those schools to become community centers, which I think is a great idea because you've got a building that's only being used, say, half the time of the day or maybe 3/4 of the day. Well, why not keep using it for other purposes instead of trying to build something new? And the kids are getting a lot of opportunities in terms of professional business experience, mentors that come in and speak to them, and, new resources for their classwork.
Well, it's great that you did this story. It's great that they're doing on-ramps to the community for folks to get involved. So where can we find all things dBusiness?
Well, dBusiness, we're online, of course, dbusiness.com, and then we're in more than 50 stores. We're just all over the region, and we have our own distribution company, so that really, really helps us.
We've learned that Detroit-based StockX, the stock market of things platform that's popular among sneakerheads as a place to buy and sell shoes, has suffered a massive data breach. The data from 6.8 million users includes names, email addresses, scrambled passwords, shoe sizes, trading currencies, and more. TechCrunch reports that the hack occurred back in May, but StockX only disclosed the breach after journalists followed up after the company sent out a password reset email that many users found suspicious.
StockX originally cited system updates as the reason it was asking people to change their password. They didn't mention the breach, nor its own investigation into suspicious activity. TechCrunch said it was able to match a sample of 1,000 records they obtained from the black market to individual users. StockX was founded in 2015 by CEO Josh Luber, Dan Gilbert, and others. It helps authenticate its stock and auction it on its online marketplace. It recently became Michigan's second unicorn company, meaning that it's worth more than $1 billion to investors. The company has recently been on a hiring spree in Detroit.
From the Freep comes word that the final pieces of those pizza slice-shaped glass panels were installed Monday at the new Little Caesars headquarters in Detroit. An unspecified problem delayed completion of the building by a year. With the facade finally completed, workers are expected to move into the building soon. Although Olympia Development has never clarified what caused the delay, the glass panels were reportedly cracking from vibrations.
They were crazy to watch put in the first time around. So about a year ago, I actually had a chance to tour this facility top to bottom. And it was midway. Actually, I saw it a couple of different times. And it was stunning to me about one, the glass facade is really an interesting design stretch. And it was a really cool idea. But also, I feel like it was one of those things that really pushed the limits of like what is actually possible, seeing how they had to mount these glass pieces. And it was really precarious even back then. But it really illustrates to me like the delays in a lot of things with the Illich Empire. One of the things I thought was interesting that I remember hearing at that event is that we were going to get like a little Caesar's pizza store or something like that, some kind of flagship store.
Right.
But that obviously isn't happening either.
Good morning, everyone. Dan Gilbert here, remember me?
Speaking of Quicken Loans, its founder and billionaire Detroit investor Dan Gilbert is making progress after suffering a stroke a couple months ago. You just heard his voice from a short video that was distributed to Quicken Loans' family of companies' employees. We still don't know any details about his condition.
It's a sigh of relief to many Detroit watchers in the business community, as Gilbert has been the center of so much activity in the last few years, including the purchase of numerous skyscrapers and a series of investments in spin-off companies. One thing I'd note, Quicken Loans had its best quarter in its history while he was gone. Gilbert even joked about it on the video.
Keep doing what you're doing, because whatever you're doing is going great. Going much better since I left a few weeks back, I noticed.
So it's hard to extract a lot from a short 20-second video or whatever it was, but he looked better than I, feared he was going to, frankly. I was preparing myself for droopy eyes or droopy lips or whatever, and he didn't look that much different, frankly. He looked rested.
Yeah, well, and that's something I bet you he hasn't taken this much rest in years. One of the things I think long-term to think about, though, is that Detroit kind of has a culture of like major leaders. If you think about Ford, if you think about Iacocca, if you think about Ruther on the union side, we really like to lionize people at the top. And the truth is there's so many interesting people that kind of make up the Quicken family of companies. We've had a few of them on the show. Mm-hmm. And I think it would do well for them to kind of lift up more voices than just Dan. I know lots of people want to talk to Dan and all that kind of stuff. Jay Farner, all the other folks there in the different companies, they've done some really interesting stuff, and they're in charge of large groups of employees. It might be smart for them to elevate some of those folks going forward. And we're done for today. 2 things before you go.
First, thanks to our wonderful supporters on Patreon. You too can become a member at patreon.com/dailydetroit. That's patreon.com/dailydetroit. We're a small mom and pop shop here, so every little bit helps.
And second, be sure to tell a friend about the Daily Detroit podcast. Both my dog
and my cats
approve of the show. We're on Apple Podcasts and a bunch of other places. We're even on the front page of Daily News there on Apple Podcasts for a while today, so that's pretty exciting.
That was pretty exciting. So, for Randy Walker and Cheyenne Nocerini over there editing, I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit after my birthday bender.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.